Hello! I would be very pleased if you would like the video. Subscribe so you don't miss new videos every day that will help you relax. I'm also curious where you are listening to me from and what time it is now. Write it in the comments. Enjoy watching! The first light of dawn stretched over the dense rainforest, casting a warm amber glow across the thatched roofs of the small Maya village. Smoke curled gently from the cooking fires where women were already preparing maize porridge, the staple of the community. Chickens clucked and dogs stirred, signaling the beginning of another day. The air was thick with humidity, carrying the earthy scent of the forest and the subtle aroma of roasted cacao beans. Men rose from their hammocks, shaking off a night's rest, and began tending to the fields. The village's maize terraces, meticulously built over generations, were already beginning to shimmer with the morning dew. Children, rubbing sleep from their eyes, followed their parents, eager to witness the familiar routines that shaped their community. The rhythmic sound of wooden mallets pounding and grinding stones filled the air as women processed maize into masa, the foundation of tortillas and tamales. The cacophony of the jungle accompanied every movement. Howler monkeys called from the canopy, warning of approaching travelers, while the distant splash of the river reminded villagers of the essential source of water. Dogs ran through the narrow pathways, alerting their masters to the arrival of the local priest or visiting traders. Life in the village was both vibrant and methodical, a balance between the natural world and human ingenuity. By mid-morning, the men had gathered the tools necessary for the day's labor. Stone axes, obsidian blades, and wooden hoes were carefully inspected. They moved toward the milpas, the maize fields, which were the lifeblood of the village. Every row of maize represented months of planning, careful planting, and ritual blessing. The priest's chants from the temple pyramid had guided the sowing season, and now the villagers honored the growth with daily attention, clearing weeds and checking for pests. Women worked not only in the kitchens but also in weaving and pottery. The rhythmic sound of backstrap looms filled the homes, as brightly dyed cotton was woven into intricate patterns reflecting the village's history and mythology. Nearby, younger women molded clay into vessels, careful to ensure each one would hold liquids without leaking. These tools were essential for cooking, storing cacao, and fermenting beverages, demonstrating the ingenuity that allowed Maya communities to thrive in the dense rainforest. Children, while not yet fully part of the labor, observed and learned. Some chased small lizards and insects, their laughter blending with the natural symphony. Others helped carry water or collect firewood. Education in Maya society was experiential. Every task performed in the village was a lesson in survival, cooperation, and respect for the land. The elders guided the young, recounting stories of ancestors and explaining the sacredness of maize, which sustained both body and spirit. By late morning, the village marketplace began to hum with activity. Traders arrived from neighboring settlements, bringing goods like jade ornaments, cacao beans, salt, and exotic feathers. Negotiations were conducted with careful etiquette, often accompanied by symbolic gestures and subtle haggling. The value of items was measured not only in utility but also in social and spiritual significance. A single obsidian blade could represent a family's wealth or a sacred offering to the gods. In the temple, the high priest prepared for midday rituals. The rhythmic beat of drums and the low hum of chants set the tone for spiritual offerings. Villagers brought small items, fruits, flowers, and finely ground maize, to honor the deities who governed rain, fertility, and the cycles of the sun and moon. These ceremonies were intertwined with daily life. The success of crops, the health of children, and the safety of hunters were believed to depend on the gods' favor. Lunch was a communal affair. Families gathered under the shade of large ceiba trees, sharing tortillas, beans, and small roasted meats. Conversation was lively but respectful. Elders imparted guidance while children listened attentively. Meals were punctuated by laughter, the occasional squabble, and the delight of discovering a sweet piece of fruit. Sharing food reinforced social bonds, a reminder that cooperation was essential in a world where survival depended on unity. After the meal, some villagers returned to the fields while others focused on maintenance of the village. Thatched roofs were repaired with new palm leaves, and walls made of stone and clay were smoothed to withstand seasonal rains. Every task had both practical and symbolic importance. By tending to their homes and surroundings, the Maya honored both their ancestors and the gods, ensuring that the village remained a safe and sacred space for future generations. As the afternoon sun climbed, hunters prepared for their journey into the forest. Armed with bows, blowpipes, and obsidian-tipped spears, they moved silently through the undergrowth. Their knowledge of the jungle was extensive. They tracked game by footprints, listened for the rustle of birds, and read subtle signs of movement. Success meant not only a meal for the village but also materials for tools, clothing, and ritual objects. Every hunt was a lesson in patience, skill, and respect for the balance of nature. Meanwhile, women continued their domestic tasks, interspersed with social interaction. Stories and advice were shared, songs were sung, and children were taught essential skills. Some visited neighbors to exchange goods, gossip, or offer assistance. The communal aspect of Maya life was evident in these daily routines. No task was undertaken in isolation, and cooperation was vital for survival. Even leisure activities served social and educational purposes, reinforcing bonds and transmitting cultural knowledge. As the afternoon waned, shadows lengthened across the village. The river shimmered in the late sunlight, and the jungle's sounds shifted from the loud calls of daytime creatures to the subtler notes of evening. Women began preparing the evening meal, grinding maize and roasting vegetables. Children returned from their informal lessons, tired but enriched by the day's experiences. Men returned from the fields and hunts, carrying the fruits of their labor with quiet satisfaction. The evening meal was accompanied by reflection and storytelling. Elders recounted the history of the village, the deeds of ancestors, and the lessons embedded in myths. Children asked questions, their curiosity bridging generations. Through these stories, the values of courage, respect, and wisdom were instilled. Rituals of gratitude followed the meal. Offerings were made to the gods, and prayers for protection and abundance were whispered into the night. Finally, the village settled into rest. Fires burned low, illuminating the simple homes. Hammocks swayed gently as families slept, lulled by the natural symphony of the rainforest. The stars emerged above, glittering over the temple pyramids, a silent reminder of the celestial cycles that guided Maya life. Another day had passed, full of work, learning, and reverence, a day that reflected the resilience, ingenuity, and spiritual depth of the Maya civilization. As the heat of midday softened, the village settled into a slower rhythm. The intense labor of the morning gave way to quieter activities. Children rested under the shade of ceiba trees, carving small toys from wood or practicing simple ball games with rubber balls. An echo of the sacred sport played in grand ceremonial courts of distant cities like Tikal or Palenque. Though their version was humble, it carried deep cultural meaning, teaching teamwork and reverence for tradition. Elders gathered nearby, speaking softly as they observed the next generation. Their words carried weight. They were the keepers of history and cosmic knowledge. Through oral traditions, they ensured that even in small villages far from the grand temples, the spirit of the Maya remained alive. They spoke of the gods who governed the rain and sun, of ancestors who had first learned to cultivate maize, and of the sacred calendars that dictated every ceremony and harvest. The Maya understood time not as a straight line, but as a series of cycles. Each sunrise and sunset was part of a greater pattern, a reflection of celestial harmony. The priests who lived near the central temple studied these patterns carefully, marking days on bark paper codices with fine black ink. Even the farmers, though less scholarly, felt the weight of these cycles in their bones. They knew when to plant, when to rest, and when to prepare offerings, all guided by the sacred count. As the afternoon progressed, a soft breeze began to stir through the village, bringing temporary relief from the heat. Women gathered in small groups to grind cacao beans, mixing them with water and spices. The bitter drink, known as chocolatl, was more than refreshment. It was sacred, believed to invigorate both body and spirit. For the wealthier families or priests, cacao was a symbol of status, often used in trade or ritual ceremonies. In one corner of the village, artisans worked with quiet concentration. A sculptor shaped limestone into a small figurine depicting a maize deity. His hands were steady, guided by years of practice and devotion. Nearby, another craftsman polished obsidian blades, ensuring they gleamed like mirrors. These tools and artworks were not merely functional. They embodied the Maya's belief that craftsmanship was an act of worship, a way to honor the gods through human skill. Children occasionally approached the artisans, fascinated by the transformation of raw materials into beauty. They were taught that every object, even a humble pot or blade, possessed a spirit. To create something was to awaken its essence, a sacred duty demanding respect and care. The Maya worldview intertwined the material and spiritual, seeing no boundary between art, work, and faith. Farther from the village center, a group of men tended to irrigation channels that carried water from a nearby stream. The system, constructed generations earlier, was a marvel of engineering. Channels of stone and clay ensured that crops received water even during the dry season. These networks reflected not only practical ingenuity but also social organization. Each family was responsible for maintaining a section, ensuring fairness and cooperation across the community. As the shadows grew longer, distant thunder rolled across the horizon. Dark clouds gathered above the jungle canopy, signaling an approaching storm. Villagers moved quickly to secure tools and cover the drying maize stored near their homes. The coming rain was both blessing and threat, vital for crops, yet capable of flooding the terraces if too intense. The priest emerged from the temple, raising his hands to the sky in silent invocation. Moments later, the first drops began to fall. The smell of wet earth rose immediately, rich and invigorating. Children danced in the rain, laughing, while adults watched with a mixture of joy and caution. Rain was sacred. It represented the tears of Chak, the rain god, whose favor sustained all life. As the downpour intensified, families gathered under shelters, listening to the rhythmic drumming of water on thatched roofs. Within their homes, conversations flowed easily. Women continued weaving, their fingers moving skillfully even in dim light. Men discussed plans for tomorrow's labor, strategies for trade, or stories of ancestors who had once served great kings. The storm outside created an intimate atmosphere, uniting families in shared warmth. In that moment, the boundaries between generations dissolved. Elders, parents, and children existed as one living continuum of tradition. When the storm finally subsided, the air felt renewed. The rain had cooled the earth, and a soft mist hung over the fields. Frogs croaked, insects reawakened, and the jungle shimmered in fresh life. Villagers stepped outside, inspecting for damage, but most smiled in relief. The maize leaves glistened, heavy with water, promising abundance. They knew that tomorrow's work would be easier, the soil softer, the air cleaner. The priest returned to the temple platform, carrying incense made from copal resin. As the smoke rose, villagers joined him in silent gratitude. Offerings of flowers and maize were placed at the temple steps, thanking Chak for his mercy. The ritual was brief but heartfelt, reaffirming the connection between people and gods. In Maya belief, nothing was taken from nature without giving something in return. Evening approached, and with it came preparation for communal gathering. Fires were rekindled, and the smell of roasted corn and beans drifted through the air. Musicians brought out drums and wooden flutes, tuning them softly as twilight descended. The night promised celebration. Not a grand festival, but a moment of unity and rest after labor. Such gatherings strengthened the invisible ties that bound the community together. As darkness settled, the village glowed with firelight. Men and women sat in circles, sharing food and stories. The musicians began to play, their rhythms echoing the heartbeat of the earth. Some danced slowly, their movements deliberate and symbolic. Every gesture had meaning, honoring the gods, the ancestors, and the harmony between the people and their land. Children dozed against their mothers, lulled by the steady beat of drums. Elders smiled faintly, remembering the countless nights they had witnessed similar scenes. The patterns of life continued unbroken, each generation stepping into the rhythm of those before. Above them, stars emerged through the clearing sky, bright and innumerable. To the Maya, these stars were not distant lights but divine beings, guardians of time and destiny. The priest, watching the heavens, murmured the names of constellations sacred to their people. He recognized the serpent of the Milky Way, the path of souls, and the twin heroes who battled the lords of the underworld. His voice blended with the hum of insects and the crackle of fire. In that moment, the mundane and the sacred became one. Life itself was the ritual, the eternal offering to the gods of creation. As night deepened, the fires dimmed, Families withdrew to their homes, hammocks swaying gently as the jungle whispered around them. The storm had passed, the earth renewed, and the stars watched over the sleeping village. Another day in the endless cycle of the Maya had drawn to its quiet close, measured not by the ticking of time, but by the heartbeat of nature itself. The night passed quietly, leaving the village cloaked in a gentle, lingering mist. The first birdsong marked the beginning of another day, signaling that the cycle of life continued as it had for generations. The air was cool, carrying the scent of wet earth and flowering plants. Villagers emerged from their homes, stretching, shaking off sleep, and preparing for the morning's labor. Even in rest, life remained intertwined with duty, ritual, and observation of the natural world. Elders, already awake, walked slowly toward the central plaza. They inspected the small altars, brushing away dust and arranging offerings from the previous day. A few children followed, silent and curious, learning by example the importance of honoring ancestors and maintaining sacred spaces. The priests emerged from the temple atop the pyramid, their feathered headdresses catching the early sunlight. The rhythm of the village depended on them. Their guidance ensured that every action aligned with the cosmic order. As the sun climbed higher, women prepared breakfast. Maize porridge was once again central, accompanied by small fruits and roasted beans. The communal nature of meals reinforced social bonds. Fathers and older children joined in, discussing the day ahead. Today, in particular, held significance. The village would host visitors from a nearby settlement, strengthening alliances and exchanging knowledge, goods, and culture. These interactions were essential in maintaining peace and mutual prosperity. With meals finished, men and women gathered tools and prepared for the journey to nearby ceremonial grounds. Hunters readied their bows and spears, farmers carried baskets of surplus maize, and artisans selected items to present as gifts. Even the children participated, carrying small bundles or assisting the elderly. Travel between villages was a sacred activity, imbued with both social and spiritual importance. The path through the jungle was well known, but still required vigilance and respect for the spirits of the forest. By mid-morning, the village delegation had reached the meeting place, a clearing adorned with stone markers and small shrines. The visitors arrived soon after, bringing their own offerings and smiling greetings. The two communities exchanged gifts, each item chosen carefully to symbolize respect, cooperation, and the shared understanding of cosmic cycles. Cacao beans, intricately woven cloth, and small jade figurines were passed among families, strengthening bonds that would last generations. The priest began a short ceremony to honor the gods and ensure the success of these interactions. Incense smoke rose, mingling with the fresh scent of the forest. Drums and flutes filled the air, establishing a rhythm that echoed the heartbeat of the earth. Chants in low, melodic tones resonated through the clearing. The ritual reminded all present that human endeavors were inseparable from divine influence and natural law. The young watched attentively, understanding that social gatherings and spiritual ceremonies were intertwined, reinforcing cultural values. Once the ritual concluded, discussions turned to practical matters. Families exchanged knowledge about crop management, hunting strategies, and water storage techniques. The villagers shared news of unusual celestial events, disease outbreaks, or changes in rainfall patterns. Even in the dense jungles, information moved quickly, vital to survival. Cooperation was as crucial as labor. A misstep in one village could affect the entire network of communities connected through kinship, trade, and spiritual obligation. By noon, the visitors departed, and the village returned to its routine. The midday sun bore down, prompting a pause in strenuous work. Women tended the youngest children, offering shade and nourishment, while men rested and repaired tools. Conversations revolved around observations from the exchange, new weaving techniques, different pottery styles, or reports of successful hunts. The collective memory of the village expanded, integrating fresh knowledge into time-honored traditions. As the afternoon unfolded, labor resumed in earnest. Farmers returned to the milpas, clearing weeds, checking maize stalks for disease, and reinforcing terraces with stone and clay. The knowledge accumulated over generations guided their hands. Each action had a purpose, contributing to the health of the crops and, ultimately, the survival of the community. Hunters ventured deeper into the forest, tracking deer, peccary, and small game, guided by signs only understood through careful observation and experience. Women worked at home and in communal areas, weaving textiles, crafting pottery, and preparing meals for the evening. The artistry involved was more than functional, it embodied the sacred. Patterns woven into cloth or carved into pots reflected myths, deities, and historical events. Young apprentices learned by observation and repetition, gradually mastering the skills that would define their adult roles. Every object carried both practical and symbolic significance, merging daily life with spiritual awareness. In the temple, priests prepared for an afternoon ritual dedicated to Chak and the sun god, Kinachahau. Maize, cacao, and small ceremonial objects were arranged meticulously. Villagers approached the temple in small groups, offering prayers and making symbolic gestures. The ritual reinforced social cohesion, reminding everyone that labor, learning, and leisure were all expressions of divine order. The rhythm of village life was inseparable from the cycles of the cosmos, and the priests served as the guardians of that harmony. As the sun began its descent, signaling the transition from day to evening, villagers gathered to share the outcomes of their labors. Hunters displayed game, farmers showed the progress of crops, and artisans presented their latest works. Stories of courage, cleverness, and perseverance were recounted. Children absorbed lessons in patience, observation, and respect. Through these gatherings, the entire community internalized the values necessary for survival and prosperity in the rainforest environment. The evening meal was again communal. Families shared tortillas, beans, roasted vegetables, and occasionally small amounts of meat. Conversations were filled with advice, observations, and the exchange of knowledge. Laughter and playful teasing coexisted with reverence for the elders and the priests. Children sat beside adults, learning both practical skills and the moral and spiritual lessons embedded in daily life. Food was sustenance, education, and ritual all at once. After the meal, as darkness enveloped the village, music began. Flutes, drums, and small rattles created a soundscape that resonated with the jungle. Dance, both spontaneous and ritualized, emerged around the central fire. Movements mirrored natural elements, recounting myths of celestial battles, heroic deeds, and the eternal cycles of life. Each participant understood the significance of gestures, the symbolism in rhythm, and the lessons carried in song. The night was alive with a blend of art, education, and spiritual devotion. Elders, observing the night, reflected on the day's events. The harmony achieved through work, ritual, and social interaction was a testament to the resilience and intelligence of their community. Their guidance ensured continuity. The knowledge, values, and techniques of generations were preserved and transmitted through example. Children, even as they played and rested, absorbed these lessons. Every action, from tending a maize stalk to participating in ceremony, was a thread in the fabric of Maya civilization. Finally, the village settled for rest. Fires dimmed, smoke drifted lazily into the night, and the sounds of the forest enveloped the sleeping community. Hammocks swayed gently, carrying families into dreams. The stars shone overhead, constellations guiding thought and ritual. The day's work had reinforced bonds, preserved traditions, and honored both gods and ancestors. Another complete cycle of labor, learning, and devotion had passed, an ordinary day in the extraordinary life of the Maya. The villagers knew that tomorrow would begin anew with the sunrise. Maize would be tended, fires would be lit, children would learn, and the cycle of life would continue. Yet, each day, though similar in structure, carried subtle differences: the mood of the forest, the generosity of rain, the arrival of distant travelers, and the small changes in the rhythm of life. Through these nuances, the Maya remained attentive and adaptive, ensuring that the community could thrive in a complex and unpredictable world. In the quiet of the night, the village rested under the canopy of stars, protected by generations of knowledge and belief. The gods, ancestors, and natural forces intertwined in an invisible dance, guiding the lives of the people. The rhythm of the cosmos and the rhythm of the village were one. The maize, the forest, the rivers, the animals, and the people existed in a delicate balance, maintained through care, respect, and devotion. The life of the Maya was, in essence, a continuous cycle of work, ritual, learning, and communal interaction. From sunrise to sunset and from season to season, they measured time not by hours but by deeds, cosmic events, and the cycles of the land. Their civilization flourished because they understood the interdependence of nature, society, and spirituality. Each day reinforced these truths, passing knowledge from generation to generation. Thus concluded a day in the life of the village. Though ordinary in its routines, it represented the extraordinary achievement of a people attuned to their environment, deeply connected to their traditions, and vigilant in preserving the balance between human endeavor and the sacred forces of the world. Every task, meal, story, and ritual formed part of a living legacy, a testament to the enduring resilience, ingenuity, and spiritual depth of the Maya civilization. Morning arrived once more, soft and humid, with sunlight filtering through the dense canopy. Villagers rose to tend their duties, but today emphasized apprenticeship and learning. Young boys followed hunters into the jungle, carrying small bows and wooden spears. Their elders taught them to track deer, peccary, and small game, pointing out footprints, broken branches, and subtle differences in foliage. These lessons required patience, observation, and silence. Even a small sound could alert prey. Girls learned domestic and artisanal skills. Near the river, they collected reeds and fibers to weave mats and baskets. Each strand was measured and placed carefully, reflecting the precision necessary for durable craftsmanship. Women taught them not only technique but also stories embedded in patterns. Spirals representing rivers, zigzags the jaguar's path, and diamonds the eyes of the maize god. Through weaving, children absorbed history, spirituality, and practical skills simultaneously. Medical knowledge was a vital part of daily life. An elder healer prepared herbal remedies from plants gathered in the jungle. Leaves of chaya and roots of ziban were boiled into infusions to treat digestive ailments. Bark and resin were combined to stop bleeding or ease fevers. Young apprentices observed carefully, learning the properties of each plant, the appropriate method of preparation, and the ceremonial respect owed to these gifts of the forest. Medicine was inseparable from ritual. Healing involved not just the body but the spirit. In the fields, farmers inspected maize and beans, checking for pests and disease. They applied natural methods, rotating crops, trimming damaged leaves, and using ashes or crushed stones to strengthen soil. Teaching children alongside daily labor ensured that ecological knowledge was transmitted. They learned which plants grew best together, how rain patterns influenced planting, and how lunar cycles dictated optimal harvesting days. Every action was both practical and symbolic, reinforcing the balance between humans and nature. Meanwhile, hunters returned with small game, sharing their bounty with the community. Boys who accompanied them practiced skinning, cleaning, and preserving meat. Elders narrated the ethical rules of hunting, never taking more than necessary, giving thanks to the spirits of the forest, and ensuring that each hunt maintained harmony. These rules were as essential as any physical skill. They preserved the delicate ecological balance upon which the village depended. Artisans' work intensified in the afternoon. Clay pots were baked in small kilns, polished, and painted with red, black, and cream pigments. Children practiced painting small figurines, learning proportions, symmetry, and sacred symbolism. Stone sculptors carved maize gods and jaguar figures, while young apprentices were instructed in careful measurement and symbolic detail. Each object had purpose: utilitarian, ceremonial, or didactic. Art connected past and present, weaving spiritual meaning into everyday objects. Education was informal but rigorous. Children were expected to observe, mimic, and gradually master skills. Boys practiced spear throwing, bow use, and simple engineering, like constructing small irrigation channels in miniature fields. Girls learned cooking techniques, textile preparation, and herbal remedies. All lessons were contextual, embedded in the rhythms of daily life, and reinforced by communal oversight. Every task was a lesson in responsibility, respect, and skill. By late afternoon, the village prepared for a mid-season ritual at the central temple. This was a smaller ceremony than the annual festivals, but no less important. The priest and his assistants arranged offerings of maize, cacao, flowers, and small ceramic items. Smoke from burning copal rose toward the sky, carrying prayers of gratitude and requests for rainfall. Families gathered respectfully, men and women kneeling while children watched from the sides. Ritual reinforced cultural continuity, binding villagers to each other, to the land, and to the cosmos. Meanwhile, scouts patrolled the perimeter of the village. Predators and rival groups required vigilance. Boys trained in tracking shadows and footprints, learning to identify both animal and human presence. Lessons in defense emphasized strategy over force. Cooperation and awareness were paramount. No one ventured alone, and the forest was respected as both provider and threat. Safety was a shared responsibility, linking families, elders, and the young in a living network of knowledge and vigilance. Evening brought communal meals. Fires burned brightly, illuminating the vibrant colors of woven textiles, polished pottery, and carefully arranged offerings. Stories and songs enriched the meal, teaching history, ethics, and astronomy. Children were encouraged to recite lessons from elders, reinforcing memory and communal identity. Every gesture, from serving food to sharing knowledge, reflected the interconnectedness of practical and spiritual life. After eating, villagers prepared for evening recreation. Small games with rubber balls, mock hunts, and riddles occupied children, while adults practiced music, dance, and storytelling. These activities were not mere leisure. They taught rhythm, coordination, social cohesion, and cultural knowledge. Dances reenacted mythic events, the journey of maize gods, battles with underworld lords, or celestial movements, linking play to education and spiritual awareness. Night fell gradually, bringing cooler air and a symphony of nocturnal sounds. Frogs croaked, insects hummed, and the occasional jaguar's roar echoed from the distant forest. Families retreated to their homes, securing tools and fires. Hammocks swayed gently as elders whispered blessings over sleeping children, ensuring protection and spiritual guidance. Sleep itself was valued as a time for reflection, restoration, and the continuation of life's rhythm. In private moments, elders reflected on the day's lessons. They noted the successes of children, the growth of crops, and the maintenance of tools and homes. Adjustments were made for the next day, which fields needed extra care, which apprentices required guidance, which rituals demanded attention. This planning was subtle but vital, ensuring the long-term sustainability of the village and the knowledge that passed from one generation to the next. The forest, ever present, reminded villagers of their place in a greater system. Rainwater collected in small pools, animals moved silently, and the wind rustled the leaves of towering ceiba and ceiba siblings. Each sound was interpreted and valued, a sign of health in the ecosystem, a warning of approaching weather, or a reminder of the spirit's presence. Knowledge of the forest was both practical and sacred, intertwined with religion, survival, and art. By midnight, the village was quiet. Fires smoldered, smoke drifting lazily toward the stars. The priest recited final prayers of protection, asking the gods to preserve life, fertility, and balance. Children, deep in dreams, learned unknowingly from the rhythm of the village: obedience, patience, respect, and curiosity. Adults slept with the assurance that knowledge, skill, and tradition would continue to guide the next day. In this extended depiction of daily life, it becomes clear that the Maya civilization was not just a collection of cities and monuments but a network of interconnected communities. Each village, no matter how small, embodied the principles of observation, adaptation, spirituality, and cooperation. Their survival depended on attentive care of both the natural world and social relationships. Every task, from hunting to weaving, from tending fields to ritual practice, contributed to the enduring rhythm of life. The day's cycle, expanded through apprenticeship, ritual, forest knowledge, and craftsmanship, demonstrated the sophistication of Maya society. Children were educated seamlessly within labor and play, ensuring continuity of knowledge. Spirituality was embedded in everyday actions, linking humans to gods, ancestors, and the natural world. Social bonds were reinforced at every level, sustaining the village through cooperation, guidance, and shared experience. As dawn approached once again, the villagers prepared to greet another day. The cycles of maize, sun, rain, and human effort continued unabated. Each sunrise marked not merely a repetition of the past but the continuation of a living tradition. Through labor, learning, and ritual, the village preserved not only its survival but the very essence of Maya civilization, an enduring testament to human ingenuity, adaptation, and reverence for life.